There are games that might have some flaws, but still just feel great to play, until you can clearly see the precise moment when the developers run out of time and things start falling apart somewhat. This is the case with one of my beloved childhood titles, Star Wars Starfighter by LucasArts. It was released in 2001 for PlayStation 2 and later got ported to PC, which is what I've played on as a kid, and Xbox, which is the version you will be seeing in this video. For two reasons. First, you can actually play it at 60 FPS with no issues. The PS2 frame rate is playable but inconsistent on real hardware, although emulation fixes that and you will have a smooth 60 FPS experience with it, while on modern PCs there are problems with stuff like menus and shaking effects unless you cap everything to 30. And second, the Xbox version can be called the definitive one, having improved graphics and more content in the form of additional bonus missions and multiplayer modes, hence its special edition subtitle. But in the grand scheme of things, those don't matter that much, so if you want to play the game, just choose the most comfortable platform for you, which might be PC, since at the moment of writing this, Star Wars Starfighter is still available on Steam and GOG. So with all that out of the way, let's see what makes this game so fun and where it sadly stumbles. Star Wars Starfighter is essentially an arcade shooter, and as such its mechanics are not complex at all, which still fits well with the universe's fake brand of physics. This might not be the sort of gameplay that fans of sub-series like X-Wing and TIE Fighter would appreciate, but it's done exceptionally well for what it is. The handling of your Starfighter is really comfortable, subtly pushing the stick is really helpful for precise movements, while going all the way will have you turn around as fast as you'd expect. Side note, you can turn on an optional third-person mode, which works absolutely fine, though first-person to me feels more comfortable for some of the mechanics. That is the traditional set of boost brake actions, where going faster obviously adds speed, but makes your ship a bit more difficult to handle, and slowing down allows you to more easily make even sharper turns, which is particularly useful during dogfights. And last but not least, you can zoom in, which obviously helps with long-distance targeting. This is an absolutely perfect setup for an arcade romp like this that's implemented very well. This type of gameplay requires external influence to balance out the simplicity of its core mechanics, more specifically, level design and ships that feel different enough. While more can be unlocked as a bonus, in the main campaign there are 3 starfighters you will control, each belonging to one of the story's characters. While I do really appreciate how each has a unique UI which helps with immersion, there is not that big of a difference between the ships outside of their secondary attacks. Some passive abilities like the rotating turret on Nim's Havoc are barely felt. So let's just say that while technically there is ship variety, the requirement is badly met, as if not for the aesthetic differences, half of the time you wouldn't feel you're flying something different, since even the speed is not contrasted enough. It doesn't help that as tight as the basics are, there are some annoying quirks related to core gameplay. First, it is often unclear how the hell you avoid getting shot. The danger marker is quite inconsistent when it comes to notifying you're being fired at, and sometimes it feels like it doesn't matter how fast you move and how drastically you change your direction, you are still getting hit. This is more of a problem during ground missions, where a lot of enemies like turrets and tanks have the advantage of staying static, and you can't change your plane relative to theirs, so you're a far easier mark for them, even though you'd think it should be the other way around. In general, the gameplay feels tuned towards space missions in more ways than one. The pushback from collisions doesn't work well at all with terrain, so if you happen to hit it, yeah, you're dead more likely than not. Ground missions also tend to have very annoying invisible walls, and if you usually don't encounter that often when they're not wide enough, you will definitely encounter more often than not when they're not high enough. I do like how physics and Nim's bombs change between space and ground missions. That's actually a very nice touch that does factor into the starfighters having a different feel to them. One final gameplay related quirk relates to target selection. On its own, the targeting system works absolutely fine. There is a manual button which chooses whatever is in front of you, a cycling through option, and an auto one which selects the most appropriate target. But while playing, you find out that this feature set is missing 2 things. First, you can cycle through only enemies. which means that if you want to find a particular ally, you need to manually select them. Not ideal, especially considering that if you want to give your wingmates a command to defend someone, you need an ally selected. The second issue is that auto-targeting does not prioritize anything based on your primary or optional objectives. Both of these combined mean that if, let's say, you get a situation where you're asked to protect an ally to complete a bonus objective...
Nim, all scouts accounted for, except one. It's Jenkins, sir. Scratch that, sir. Got him on my sensors. Help him out.
Well, first, good luck finding the ally. Second, have fun finding what the hell is pursuing them. And you know, when it's in relation to a bonus objective, the punishment is not receiving one of the 3 possible medals, okay. But when you need to protect someone as part of the main mission and hear this...
There go my shields! I need protection over here! I'm not gonna make it!
Yeah, nothing can get more annoying as you try to figure out where you need to go. To be fair, there is a poorly tutorialized option to showcase every ally and enemy, but it really doesn't make things any easier in these situations. Which naturally brings us to level design. The game has 14 main missions, each has 3 bonus objectives, and you'll get a bronze, silver or gold medal depending on how many of them you complete in the same run, which is a big part of what brings replay value. Every level will take anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes to complete in a successful scenario. So yeah, you can beat Star Wars Starfighter in 4 hours, which in my mind is not really a negative. And to the game's credit, it has a very healthy distribution of space and ground missions with offensive and defensive scenarios. While obviously this being Star Wars, planet surface variety with all the different biomes is expected, I was positively surprised how Starfighter keeps the space setting fresh every time you visit it. One time you'll be near and in an asteroid belt, another you have to go through and destroy the satellites, controlling a planetary gun that fires at you. Later you'll find yourself trying to go through the Naboo blockade, familiar to everyone who watched episode 1 The Phantom Menace, and the final mission is a recreation of the assault on the droid control ship from that film as well. Though that final mission is also where I didn't resist and turned on an invincibility cheat, cause I just couldn't be bothered to deal with everything the game throws at me. And this is the problem that you start feeling during Mission 7, where you have to destroy a Trade Federation factory, and it just keeps escalating until the very end, with the exception of Mission 12, which is surprisingly balanced considering it's about protecting a group of prisoners escaping on boats. I even managed to get a gold medal on it, even though it's not something I would pursue on purpose, considering that bonus requirements fall into the same trap as the missions proper. Starting with that Mission 7 midpoint, the balance and polish just progressively gets more out of whack, with there being too many enemies thrown either at you or at your allies who must survive. It can get really frustrating considering that it's not that difficult to die in this game, and you can just feel how these later segments wouldn't get the same amount of attention as the first half, not only in terms of gameplay, but narrative as well. Now, obviously, a game like Starfighter is not played for its story, but rather for an adrenaline surge of Star Wars action, and from that perspective, it works perfectly. I mean, you can just take a look at a bit of unedited gameplay footage.
Whoa! Rescue flight, hold back until we can take care of these island turrets.
If we don't take out that gate quickly, the rescue ships will get slaughtered. Copy that. We'll wait for your clearance. This is Rescue 3. We're out of the tunnel. Target acquired.
Engaging.
I got it. Don't worry. We're taking fire!
The music, the sound effects, the environments, the voice communication, this game just oozes Star Wars. But a nicely structured tale always helps with immersion, and in the first half of the game the story is nicely structured, telling how these 3 playable characters from absolutely different walks of life get brought together. The idealist cadet from Naboo, Rhys Dallows, wants to avenge his mentor Asara, whose ship was destroyed by a mercenary hired by the Trade Federation to assassinate the Queen before the invasion. The jaded mercenary Vanna Sage also worked for the Trade Federation, but an intercepted transmission about the said assassination attempt has made her an enemy to the former employers. And finally, there is the pirate Neem, whose base was eventually captured by the Trade Federation. As a result, these three become allies, together with the Toydorian Reti, who really brings a lot of life into the whole premise.
What's up, Ugly?
Look who's talking.
After they thwart the Trade Federation's plans by destroying a droid factory with theirs on Eos, they travel to Naboo to help the Resistance repel the invasion. And it's during this return to Naboo where things start breaking down and it feels like stuff just happens. The connective tissue gradually becomes weaker and weaker to the point that the last mission literally comes out of nowhere. There's absolutely zero indication what is this assault we're doing, and if you happen to not watch The Phantom Menace, you'll be out of the loop entirely. Oh, and remember I mentioned that Asara was killed by a Trade Federation mercenary? Well, the game forgets about this mercenary entirely and suddenly pulls him out of nowhere to serve as a final boss, whom you have to fight inside the droid control ship where everything is shooting at you. The connection with the first movie is cool, of course, which includes escaping the control ship after Anakin causes an explosive chain reaction, but other than the ending scene, which does wrap things up nicely, there is no proper build-up or payoff to the parts set up by the game itself. Doesn't help that CGI cutscenes look clunky even at their best, and when the game decides to show close-ups of in-game models that aren't meant to be seen up close, yeesh. And you know, a deeper narrative engagement could help to balance out emotionally the increase in frustration from the second half's gameplay, but it only solidifies that frustration instead. Which doesn't mean that Star Wars Starfighter is a game that's absolutely not worthy of your time, as you will see when we actually rate it according to my Statocritic scoring system that's divided into 5 different categories of various weights. The first is design, with the biggest importance, the weight of 4, for obvious reasons. How the game plays defines our experience the most. During the first half of the campaign, Starfighter felt to me like a solid 8. A very well done core, but one that doesn't push some of the required aspects far enough. And there are annoyances there and there which bring the experience down. But the second half would get me pretty enraged, honestly. Conceptually, the levels are still fine, but their lack of balance and polish sadly bring the score down to 7, which is still solid, of course. Then we've got emotions, which has a weight of 3. It's an important category because you can still love a flawed game or be bored from a perfectly made one. And look, despite my frustrations, and maybe this is partially influenced by nostalgia, I still had a lot of fun with Star Wars Starfighter, which is why this category will get assigned an 8. However, unlike my childhood self, I'm not going to spend hours upon hours to get all the gold medals and unlock everything, as that just doesn't feel like it would be worth it. Next, cohesion, a category with a weight of 2 that's about how well the game connects different parts of the experience together. And maybe to someone's surprise, I will assign an 8. I know that the story stops making sense at some point, but there are 2 important things to consider. First, does this game feel like Star Wars and not just a random title with a Star Wars skin? It feels like Star Wars. And second, it's really awesome how the game represents these different characters and their personalities through their ships, in terms of UI, secondary attacks, and the Starfighter designs themselves, even in the case of one that is taken straight from the Episode 1 movie. Which brings us to context, a category that's all about how our actions are contextualized through world building, story, characters, and so on. It has a weight of 1 because ultimately, even if narrative is shit, the game can still be enjoyable. Similarly to design, in the first half of the game I was absolutely sure that I would assign a 7. The cast of characters is not amazing, but it's interesting. The writing is not fantastic, but it's fun. Again, everything was very nicely structured and tied to Episode 1. And then the second half happens, which brings the score down to 6. Still overall on the positive side, but it doesn't fully stick the landing. The final category is aesthetics. It's all about visuals, sound design, music, and it also has a weight of 1 pretty much for similar reasons. Now, if I would have to rate Star Wars Starfighter in this category only for its gameplay segments, it would definitely get a 10. Again, the game just oozes Star Wars. But the inconsistent quality of its cutscenes, the lack of emotions in voice acting once again in the second half of the game, yeah, sadly a 9 it is. With all that said and done, had Star Wars Starfighter managed to keep the quality of its first half throughout the entire experience, it would get a Statocritic rating of 81. But with all these flaws that crop out, it will receive 75, which still means that it's a pretty good game. If you're a fan of Star Wars or a fan of arcade space shooters, I don't see a reason for you to not try Starfighter out if you haven't already. It's a very fine title, but I wish I could call it great. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this little dive into the past of Star Wars games. I can't call it a deep dive because even though I went into some nitty-gritty details, ultimately a game like Star Wars Starfighter doesn't necessitate a heavy breakdown. It's just a bit of fun we all needed in our life, and I know I definitely had some. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.